Sehr geehrte Teilnehmende am heutigen Tag, meine Damen und Herren, herzlich willkommen zum zweiten Tag des Swiss Cyber Security Days 2021. Ein wichtiger Fokus unseres zweiten Tages ist die digitale Transformation und die Innovation. Nach einer schweizweiten Standortbestimmung der digitalen Transformation werden wir die innovative Cybersecurity Startup Community der Schweiz beleuchten. Der Bereich der Innovation wird anhand der Swiss Cybersecurity Startup Map erfasst und kartografiert. Aus dieser Karte und Landschaft werden sich heute besonders innovative Firmen und Ansätze präsentieren.
Place donc à notre intervenant que je vous présentais tout à l'heure, André Duvillard, le délégué du Réseau national de sécurité. À vous, Monsieur Duvillard.
Voilà, mesdames, messieurs, à mon tour de vous saluer. Je vais, au cours des 15 prochaines minutes, vous livrer quelques réflexions, quelques conseils sur le rôle des PME dans le cadre de la stratégie nationale contre les cyberrisques, parce qu'il est vrai que les PME sont un partenaire important dans cette lutte et que nous sommes particulièrement heureux que cette journée leur soit dédiée. Alors, je vais le faire en divisant mon exposé en 4 parties, en quelque sorte. Tout d'abord, évidemment, je reviendrai très brièvement sur le réseau national de sécurité, vous expliquer pourquoi je suis là, en fait, aujourd'hui. Ensuite, je mettrai un effort principal, en quelque sorte, sur les PME qui sont au cœur de notre tissu économique et qui sont donc un acteur important en matière de cybersécurité. Et puis, j'aimerais illustrer ces propos, finalement, avec un exemple tiré de l'actualité que certainement chacun d'entre vous connaît, c'est celui de l'attaque dont a été victime l'entreprise Mayer et Tobler en 2019. Et puis je finirai évidemment par quelques conclusions. Oui, c'est presque une évidence qu'une journée soit consacrée aux PME dans le cadre de cette 3e édition des Swiss Cyber Security Days, puisque les PME, vous le savez, représentent le 99% de nos entreprises et puis qu'elles regroupent aussi le 2/3 des emplois de ce pays. Donc c'est évidemment un partenaire important, c'est un public cible aussi en matière de lutte contre les cyberrisques. Alors vous vous êtes certainement posé la question, mais que fait le délégué du Réseau national de sécurité lors de cette journée? La réponse est relativement simple. Le Réseau national de sécurité qui a été initié dans le cadre du rapport de politique de sécurité 2010 est aujourd'hui le principal interface entre la Confédération et les cantons sur les principaux enjeux en matière de politique de sécurité. Et je crois qu'il n'y a ici aucun doute que le domaine digital, le domaine cyber est aujourd'hui un enjeu majeur. Alors, j'aime bien parler du cyberfédéralisme, parce que je crois que s'il y a un domaine en matière de politique de sécurité qui ne peut être résolu par des silos, c'est bien le domaine cyber. Et aujourd'hui, nous reconnaissons 3 domaines bien déterminés, que sont la cyberdéfense, que sont la cybercriminalité et la cybersécurité. Et ces 3 domaines ne sont pas des silos, mais comme on le voit ici, interagissent plutôt ensemble. Et puis, dans ces 3 domaines, on a des compétences différentes entre la Confédération et les cantons. Prenons l'exemple de la cybercriminalité. C'est évidemment une affaire essentiellement cantonale. Le 80% des cas sont traités au niveau des cantons. Et puis, évidemment, pour que cela fonctionne, il faut que ce travail soit coordonné, ce qui se fait maintenant depuis 8 ans. Je dirais que Confédération et cantons ont développé cette coordination. Ils travaillent aujourd'hui main dans la main et on en veut pour preuve que dans le cadre de la stratégie actuelle, les cantons ont développé 13 mesures pour sa mise en œuvre, ce qui montre ici la prise de conscience des cantons qu'ils sont un acteur important. Et j'ai dit, qui dit canton, dit aussi PME. Et j'aimerais ici juste vous présenter 2 de ces projets que nous menons actuellement. Le premier est un outil d'auto-évaluation que nous avons élaboré au fil des ans et qui permet aux cantons, tous les 2 ans, de faire une évaluation, une analyse de leurs risques. Je parle des administrations cantonales. Et ce système fonctionne aujourd'hui très bien parce que l'analyse de risque est un peu le début de toute stratégie. Et je crois que cela concerne aussi les entreprises, de savoir exactement où sont les lacunes, quelles sont les mesures à prendre. Et puis ce travail, nous le faisons maintenant depuis 5 ans. Et l'ensemble des cantons participent à cette démarche, ce qui nous permet d'avoir une vue d'ensemble. Je tiens à préciser qu'il ne s'agit pas d'un ranking, il s'agit vraiment de transmettre à chaque canton l'état des lieux en quelque sorte. Deuxième exemple sur les projets que nous menons, c'est celui d'une recommandation qui doit permettre aux cantons d'avoir des organisations cyber. Et c'est là aussi le lien que je fais avec les PME, c'est qu'évidemment les cantons doivent avoir leur réseau, avoir leur structure, leur organe de coordination dans lesquels on doit pouvoir intégrer également un certain nombre d'acteurs privés et les PME en font partie. Je l'ai dit, les PME, le premier partenaire se situe vraisemblablement au niveau des cantons. C'est là où on peut obtenir des informations. C'est là où on doit prendre contact aussi en cas de problème, le cas échéant. Donc je crois que cet élément-là est important et va contribuer à renforcer ce partenariat. Voilà, j'en viens maintenant au point peut-être le plus important qui est celui des PME au centre de la cybersécurité de la Suisse. Je l'ai dit, on ne dispose pas de chiffres très précis, mais le hasard du calendrier, en quelque sorte, veut qu'en 2020, une étude a été menée par l'Institut GFS de Zurich auprès de 500 PME, donc ce qui nous donne quand même une bonne vue d'ensemble. Une étude similaire avait déjà été effectuée en 2017. Et ce qu'on peut retirer de cette étude, c'est que 11% seulement de ces 500 entreprises ont estimé que le risque cyber était majeur, était important. Et puis, je dirais, à l'autre bout de l'échelle, on se rend compte qu'un quart des entreprises ont estimé qu'elles avaient été victimes d'une cyberattaque qui était ciblée sur leur entreprise. Donc on voit 11% des entreprises consultées estiment que le risque est somme toute relativement faible, mais 25% d'entre elles admettent simultanément qu'elles ont été victimes d'une attaque. Donc on voit ici qu'il y a une forme de discrépance. Et puis je crois qu'ici, il y a encore un assez gros travail à faire au niveau de l'information. On pense être bien informé, mais je pense qu'ici, il y a un travail important à faire. Alors, cette étude est résumée ici sur cette slide. C'est assez intéressant de voir, par exemple, sur les deux premières lignes, qu'entre 2017 et 2020, cette notion de risque a diminué. Alors que dans l'intervalle entre 2017 et 2020, le nombre d'attaques, la qualité de ces attaques s'est développée. La digitalisation se développe de manière, on peut dire, quasi exponentielle. Et de l'autre côté, elle implique qu'on prenne un certain nombre de mesures. Et ces mesures ne sont pas toujours prises parce qu'on peine à comprendre les enjeux. Et puis, l'autre aspect, et je crois que ça c'est une constante aussi, on a encore aujourd'hui tous trop tendance à penser simplement que la réponse à cette forme de menace se trouvera dans l'évolution de la technologie. Et je le ramène peut-être à une entreprise, c'est de se dire finalement, j'ai un bon système informatique, j'ai un bon informaticien, j'ai une bonne entreprise qui s'occupe de ces tâches, donc c'est eux qui vont résoudre les problèmes. Et je crois que ça, c'est une erreur aujourd'hui de penser que c'est la technique qui va résoudre, puisqu'évidemment, on va largement au-delà de la technique pour faire face à cet enjeu. Mais je crois que ce qu'il faut bien retenir sur cet aspect-là, c'est de penser que ce n'est pas une affaire que de technique, c'est véritablement une affaire de stratégie, on va dire, de l'entreprise, et j'y reviendrai dans mes conclusions. J'en viens maintenant sur cet exemple de l'entreprise Mayer & Tobler. Alors, ce n'est pas une PME à proprement parler, puisqu'elle a plus de 1500 employés, mais c'est bien plus le contexte de cette attaque qui me paraissait intéressant. Et puis d'autre part, c'est que cette entreprise-là a fait le choix d'être transparente, de communiquer en détail sur ce qui s'est passé, sur les conséquences pour l'entreprise. Et je crois que ça, c'est plutôt aussi une exception qu'une entreprise prenne l'initiative d'aller vers le public et d'expliquer ce qui s'est passé. Alors, par rapport à ces éléments, quelles conclusions, quelles recommandations pouvons-nous tirer? La première, j'aimerais dire ici, nous ne devons jamais oublier que derrière toutes ces attaques, souvent la cause principale de l'attaque est le facteur humain. On a tous un moment d'inattention lorsqu'on ouvre un email, on ne vérifie pas un certain nombre de choses. On a tous à un moment donné la tête ailleurs et puis on va négliger peut-être une règle de sécurité au niveau de son mot de passe. Et je crois que ça, il ne faut pas l'oublier. Et pour ce facteur humain, pour réduire le risque, il y a un travail de sensibilisation. Je l'ai dit, la lutte contre les cyberrisques, ce n'est pas que de la technique, c'est ce travail de sensibilisation auprès de l'ensemble des collaborateurs, parce qu'évidemment aujourd'hui, chaque collaborateur a d'une manière ou d'une autre un accès informatique sur l'entreprise, donc ce travail doit être fait. Et puis ça m'amène à une deuxième recommandation, c'est que la cybersécurité, c'est une affaire de chef. Elle ne peut pas être déléguée sur les buts que l'on veut atteindre. Et je crois qu'il y a une responsabilité ici des entreprises, de leurs responsables, de véritablement définir des stratégies, quelle que soit la taille de l'entreprise, de définir des objectifs, d'éventuellement prendre des mesures et de s'impliquer dans cette réflexion. Elle ne peut pas être déléguée. Et je crois que ça, c'est ici un élément qui est extrêmement important. Ensuite, vous devez avoir des partenaires dans votre canton. Alors j'ai pris ici un exemple, mais il y en a plein d'autres en Suisse. Vous le voyez, aujourd'hui, les autorités développent toute une série d'outils. Et c'est la page Internet de la police cantonale bernoise, en l'occurrence, qui a dédié ici une page aux PME avec un certain nombre d'informations et de recommandations. Alors c'est vrai qu'on en trouve beaucoup des informations, mais faites usage parce que souvent ce sont des informations qui sont simples, qui peuvent être efficaces, donc faites utilisation. Et puis l'autre aspect, ce que font beaucoup de cantons aussi aujourd'hui, c'est d'aller à la rencontre des entreprises sur cette problématique-là, de leur offrir un certain nombre d'informations, de renseignements, de conseils. Pas plus tard qu'en septembre dernier, je participais à une de ces séances d'information qui était organisée par le canton du Tessin, où bon nombre d'entreprises étaient présentes. Faites bon usage de ces offres qui vous sont faites parce que, évidemment, ce sera votre premier point d'accroche. Et puis, le dernier élément, évidemment, c'est celui qui a trait à l'appui qui est donné au niveau national. Nous avons maintenant un centre national de compétences cyber qui se développe, qui se met en place, qui est encore en phase de construction, mais qui a déjà atteint beaucoup de résultats extrêmement positifs. Vous avez ici un extrait, il y a sa page Internet, et vous le voyez, il y a ici un onglet qui est spécifiquement dédié aux entreprises, où vous pouvez aussi retrouver toute une série d'informations. Et puis le dernier élément, parce que ce site a une vocation, c'est d'être en quelque sorte la centrale nationale où on récolte des informations, dédié aussi bien aux entreprises qu'à la population. Et on a voulu mettre en place un point d'entrée en quelque sorte unique où on peut déposer lorsqu'on a été victime d'une attaque ou lorsqu'on a constaté quelque chose ou un mail a paru suspect, on peut le déposer sur cette plateforme et ensuite il y a un tri qui est fait entre ce qui est de première importance, entre ce qui doit être redirigé vers les cantons, mais là aussi on peut l'utiliser. Alors évidemment ça amène aussi au thème de l'obligation d'annonce. Alors aujourd'hui vous le savez, il n'y a pas d'obligation d'annonce que ce soit pour les entreprises de signaler un événement cyber. Un projet est en discussion au plan fédéral qui évidemment touchera vraisemblablement des entreprises bien spécifiques. Mais je crois que peut-être qu'il faut aussi retenir, c'est si vous êtes victime d'une attaque, annoncez-le aux autorités. D'une part, ça nous permet de prendre connaissance. D'autre part, ça permet peut-être de l'inscrire dans un phénomène plus global. Et puis, contrairement à ce que beaucoup de personnes pensent, en fait, oui, on peut faire quelque chose. On ne peut pas à chaque fois trouver les auteurs. Mais les autorités de poursuite pénale, les polices, développent aussi aujourd'hui de nouveaux instruments qui permettent en fait de lutter contre ces phénomènes-là. La collaboration internationale s'intensifie. Donc, le fait d'annoncer un événement peut parfois permettre aussi de mettre fin à un phénomène et ça nous paraît important. Voilà, ce sont les quelques éléments que je voulais vous livrer au début de cette journée consacrée aux PME. Donc, faites-en bon usage. Faites aussi bon usage des nombreux autres exposés qui vont être faits et qui vous permettront, je l'espère, de repartir de cette journée avec quelques outils supplémentaires pour faire face à la menace des cyberrisques. Voilà, je vous remercie pour votre attention.
Just a bit of brief background on myself. I'm a retired United States Air Force general. I spent most of my career as a fighter pilot flying an airplane called the F-15. Towards the end of my career, the last 5 years or so, I made a transition from being in the operational fighter pilot world to being an IT person, a cybersecurity person. And so I spent the last 5 years working the issues that we're going to talk about today. And once I retired from cyberspace is that sometimes we find it hard to kind of wrap our minds around it because you can't see cyberspace like you can see other things. And a lot of times we have a gap in language and perception and understanding between people that technically understand cyberspace and the people that actually just want to use cyberspace or use the internet to do things. And so I found it very important to have analogies or comparisons, things that allow people to transition from things that they understand in the physical world to think about cyberspace. And so when I think about this concept of a global commons, what's useful for me is to compare that to the maritime environment or the oceans. And so if we think about, 3/4 of our Earth is covered with water, and we use these oceans in a variety of ways. As individuals, if you're lucky enough to have a beautiful boat like this, then you have rights and privileges and responsibilities in terms of how you operate in the ocean with your private vessel. And then if you're a business or you're a company, you certainly rely on the oceans in order to execute your business. But again, you have a separate set of rights and responsibilities and privileges to operate in that global commons as a business. And then certainly each of our countries that has a navy and relies on being able to operate in the global commons of the maritime environment for national security reasons, we also have rights and privileges and responsibilities. And the bottom line is, with that global commons, we expect everyone to be able to coexist in there. And we establish red lines and rules and standards of behavior. And most of those are recognized, and most of those are respected. But there are certainly times, and this represents one example of that, when we saw a lot of piracy. And we've always seen piracy, of course, but it really escalated in the areas off the coast of Somalia several years ago. And so when we start to see challenges to the ability to use that global commons, when we start to see that people are not adhering to those red lines and rules, then we have to step in and we have to reinforce what those red lines and rules are. And what we saw with the piracy in Somalia is at the nation state level, several of the navies around the world stepped in to reinforce those rules and responsibilities. Even the United States and the Chinese Navy were both involved with that at the time. And so if we think about how we operate in that global commons of the maritime environment, I think there's a direct analogy to cyberspace, where individuals want to be able to operate there, businesses want to be able to operate there, and nations want to be able to use cyberspace in order to advance their own strategic goals. And so what we have to think about is, what are the challenges to being able to do that, and how do we establish conditions that allow us to work together to ensure that cyberspace and the internet can be used in a responsible and peaceful way. And there are a number of threats to our ability to do this. I classify them kind of in two major areas: the nation state threat and the criminal threat. And so if we think about the nation state threat, certainly in the US and probably most of Europe and other parts of the world, we tend to focus on these four countries as sometimes challenging those red lines and rules. China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran have all had well-publicized events that have challenged our ability to use cyberspace and to use the internet in a way that we think would benefit all. And then on the other side are the criminal threat groups. And certainly these criminal threat groups have become more capable and more pervasive over the last several years. I certainly know that things that when I was working at United States Cyber Command 7 or 8 years ago, things that we saw were only nation state capabilities are now available to the criminal threat. And so as we look across this threat landscape, it becomes clear that we cannot continue to operate and defend cyberspace in the same way we've always done that. We know that that is a failed approach, because as we look at everything from 2 or 3 years ago, the NotPetya and other attacks that had significant impacts, for example, on the UK healthcare system, all the way to what we saw at the end of the year with the attacks that have been attributed to Russia involving SolarWinds and that important software that was literally used worldwide. That what we're doing right now is not effective and is not successful, and there's other ways to be able to combat these threats. And so if I think about it now, I would argue that our current strategy is a failed strategy. We try to defend one company or one organization at a time. And defending in isolation does not work. Because if we look at those threats, both on the nation state side and the criminal side, they are all very good at collaborating and working together. Yet on the other side, on let's just call it the side that we're talking about, these individuals and companies and nations working together, invariably we find that we try to defend our own company or our own organization or our own enterprise. We don't want to take advantage of the collective abilities of the group, and we absolutely must take a collective defense approach. We have to start working together to more effectively share technology, share information, and share, importantly, the technical expertise it takes to defend this global commons of cyberspace. Because again, another analogy I find useful is to think about maybe this is a United States aircraft carrier. And that's a very capable ship. It's got radars and missiles and all sorts of things. But if this ship has to go to combat, if this ship has to go to war, it doesn't go to war like this. It goes to more like this, where it goes with other ships. It goes with submarines you can't see in this picture. It goes with airplanes. It goes to combat connected to satellites. And the reason it does that is because we have to bring together the capabilities of multiple platforms in order to be able to defend this carrier battle group. We've got to have a way to share information in real time. It's got to be shared electronically. If they perceive a threat to this carrier battle group, nobody is sending an email or making a phone call. All of the data about that threat is transmitted electronically, and everybody can see the same picture of what I'll call the attack surface of the potential threats to this carrier battle group. And that allows everybody to focus on those very specific threats, and it allows them to bring the different capabilities each of these platforms has to bear on dealing with that threat, on mitigating that threat. And so I'd argue we have to think about cyberspace in the same way. No one has a complete picture of all of the threats at a single time. There's too many threats for us to deal with them all at once. We have to have a way to focus on the threats that are most important. We have to be able to see when large campaigns are in progress, and we have to be able to collaborate and work together in order to counter those threats. And so I like to think of it as these three components of collective defense. Number one, behavioral detection. 10 years ago, it was what we refer to as malware. It was very specific pieces of software that started these particular hacks. And what we're seeing now, and was really highlighted with the SolarWinds event at the end of last year, is that threats today don't rely so much on malware. What they rely on is they take advantage of known software, of common services, of common applications, of common protocols. They steal somebody's credentials. The bottom line is we can't use a very specific, what we refer to as a signature, a simple way to say, oh, I see that and that's bad. We have to have a way to understand when those attackers are using these things that are very normal looking in our network, but they're being used in other abnormal or malicious ways. And so what we have to do is we have to look at the behavior. We have to look at characteristics of the activity to say, this is just not normal. And I'll give you a couple of examples of that in a minute. The second thing is we need to have visibility, like we talked about with the carrier battle group. We need to be able to see when a campaign is in progress, not just when I'm being attacked. And then we need to be able to collaborate and work together.
Gibt es natürlich verschiedene Dilemmas. Sie fragen sich vielleicht, ja, was macht einer vom VBS hier in einem KMU-Slot? Ich denke, die Herausforderung, die haben wir alle in etwa dieselben, natürlich unabhängig davon, wie groß eine Organisation ist. Aber ich möchte Ihnen gerne zuerst einen Einblick geben in unsere Dilemmas der Digitalisierung, die wir festgestellt haben, und vielleicht auch ein bisschen aufzeigen, was es für Lösungsansätze dazu gibt. Ich werde Ihnen gerne etwas über VBS und KMUs sagen, also warum sind dann die KMUs für das VBS beispielsweise wichtig, und dann noch abschließend einen kurzen Blick in unsere Werkstatt, wo wir gerade dabei sind. Digital aber sicher, unser Motto für den Aufbau dieser neuen Abteilung. Eben dieses Spannungsfeld zwischen Nutzen und Schützen. Ich werde noch darauf zurückkommen. Zum ersten Dilemma, ich weiß nicht, die meisten von Ihnen kennen das VBS und wissen, dass dort eben nicht nur das Militär beheimatet ist, sondern es ist sehr heterogen aufgebaut. Wir haben beispielsweise den Nachrichtendienst bei uns, wir haben aber auch das Bundesamt für Bevölkerungsschutz oder auch Swisstopo oder das Bundesamt für Bevölkerungsschutz. Wenn Sie diese Aufgaben dieser Ämter anschauen, dann erkennen Sie sehr schnell, dass die Ausgangslage sehr, sehr unterschiedlich ist und damit auch die Bedürfnisse an die Digitalisierung. Die Herausforderung für uns ist es, eine Digitalisierung so zu ermöglichen, dass es den Bedürfnissen entspricht dieser einzelnen Ämter, damit sie sich entfalten können, damit sie Wert generieren können und ihrer täglichen Arbeit nachkommen können. Wie versuchen wir dieses Dilemma zu lösen? Wir sind gerade dabei, eine Digitalisierungs-Governance aufzubauen. Wir nennen es absichtlich nicht, wie vielleicht häufig bekannt, IKT-Governance. Wir wollen mit dem Wort Digitalisierung eigentlich zeigen, dass es um mehr geht als um Technologie. Es geht um die Verknüpfung von Technologie mit dem eigentlichen Geschäft, um eben diese neuen Technologien für das Geschäft nutzbar zu machen. Die Herausforderung dieser Digitalisierungsgovernance ist es eben, auf die Bestimmtheit, auf die einzelnen Ämter und die Bedürfnisse eingehen zu können und gleichzeitig einen Rahmen zu schaffen, in welchem sich alle darin bewegen können. Also Ziel ist es, Freiheiten zu schaffen für die einzelnen Bereiche und gleichzeitig sich zu überlegen, welche Bereiche sind jetzt für alle gleich und die machen wir dann miteinander als Departement und welche Bereiche überlassen wir der Freiheit. Ich denke, das ist in Ihrer KMU-Land ist es genau gleich. Sie haben Abteilungen, die sind sehr viel weiter in der Digitalisierung, für andere ist das etwas Neuland. Es gibt vielleicht sogar Firmenbereiche, wenn Sie verschiedene Bereiche haben, die ganz unterschiedlich auf Digitalisierung reagieren. Und unsere Herausforderung ist es eben, das aufeinander abzustimmen und in einer Governance, in einer sogenannten Governance, also in einer Rollenklärung zu definieren. Ein zweites ganz spannendes Dilemma, das wir haben, ist, ich nenne es mal neue Methoden, alte Kulturen. Das Wort alt ist natürlich behaftet und negativ, das ist überhaupt nicht so gemeint. Wir kennen es alle, wir sollten neue Methoden anwenden, eher eben diese agilen Methode, ist natürlich ein Schlagwort, das man sehr oft hört. Geprägt sind wir aber eher, wenn ich dieses Bild von Gartner nehme, von den Marathonläufern. Die Marathonläufer sind eigentlich die eine Firma oder eine Verwaltung dorthin gebracht hat, wo wir heute sind. Aber wir müssen jetzt in diesen Transformationsprozess rein und brauchen eigentlich Sprinter. Und wie kommen wir dahin? Wir können ja nicht aus jedem Marathonläufer von heute auf morgen einen Sprinter machen. Das sind unterschiedliche Arbeitsweisen und die haben beide ihre Berechtigung. Für uns ist es sehr wichtig, dass wir diese Leute eben auf Augenhöhe haben und nicht ein Konkurrenzdenken haben. Also es mag widersprüchlich klingen, dass man wie zwei Kulturen hat in einem Unternehmen oder in einer Organisationseinheit, aber das ist der Schlüssel für die Zukunft, wie wir ihn sehen. Sie kennen vielleicht diese Doppel-S-Kurve. Hier haben wir Begriffe, die eher aus der Wirtschaftswelt kommen, stimmen aber für mich auch für die Verwaltung. Sie sehen die rote Linie hier in dieser Doppel-S-Kurve, das wären so eher die Marathonläufer, also das ist die Vergangenheit und das sind eigentlich die heute das Business definieren und dort werden auch Werte geschaffen, also da kommt das Geld heute her. Und unten auf der grünen Kurve sehen wir eigentlich, die tragen weniger zum Profit bei, aber viel für die Zukunft, also für das zukünftige Geschäftsmodell. Und diese Kulturen eben nebeneinander entstehen zu lassen und sich gegenseitig abzulösen, das ist eigentlich der Schlüssel zum Erfolg und genau das ist es, was wir versuchen auch bei uns im VBS hinzukriegen, dass wir den Wert der Marathonläufer sehen, aber eben auch parallel dazu eher diese agile, diese neue Kultur aufbauen und irgendwann wird sich das ablösen und dann wird das nächste S in der Kurve kommen. Also das ist nicht etwas, was jetzt neu ist, das kennen Sie aus der Vergangenheit auch. Es gibt Änderungen und die muss man mitmachen und das ist eigentlich hier sehr gut dargestellt in dieser Kurve. Das dritte Dilemma, Schutz und Nutzen, das ist etwas, was Sie vielleicht auch kennen. Ich habe hier das Beispiel genommen eines Fußballspielfeldes, das ist sicher allen geläufig. Sie sehen dort vorne den Sturm, das sind vielleicht eher die Digitalisierungsleute, also Leute, die etwas verändern wollen und eben diese neuen Technologien nutzen wollen. Das sind so ein bisschen die Stürmer, die Tore schießen, das sind halt die etwas heute vielleicht mehr im Rampenlicht stehen, weil es zukunftsgerichtet ist. Wir haben aber auch das Mittelfeld, ich habe das hier mal IKT genannt, das ist für mich die Technologie, die zur Verfügung gestellt werden muss, damit eben die Digitalisierung stattfinden kann. Und dann, was hier speziell ist, Cyber Defense oder Cybersicherheit, das ist eigentlich die Verteidigung. Und was ganz wichtig ist, wenn man dieses Dilemma in den Griff kriegen will zwischen Schutz und Nutzen, ist, dass man versucht, beide diese Disziplinen in dieselbe Mannschaft zu bekommen. Sie sehen es hier dargestellt und jeder, der Fußball schaut, kennt das auch, dass auch mal ein Verteidiger an der Seitenlinie bis zum Sturm läuft, dass er vielleicht sogar ein Tor schießt, dass ein Stürmer in der Verteidigung aushelfen geht, wenn es brennt hinten und so weiter. Damit dieses Zusammenspiel funktionieren kann, braucht es eben diese Mannschaft und dass wir alle diese Disziplinen in derselben Mannschaft haben. Das ist für mich sehr, sehr wichtig, dass wir das hingekriegt haben, dass wir eben nicht das getrennt haben organisatorisch. Die einen sind zuständig für die Sicherheit und die anderen für die Digitalisierung. Wir haben es geschafft, mit dieser neuen Abteilung beide diese Disziplinen zusammen zu haben. Der Begriff Cyber Defense ist vielleicht etwas spezifisch für das VBS, darauf komme ich später noch zurück. Also hier sehen Sie sehr gut unseren Slogan, digital aber sicher. Also wir wollen Tore schießen, wir wollen die Zukunftstechnologien anwenden, aber wir machen das auf der Art, dass es eben auch sicher ist. Vielleicht VBS und KMU, auch das ist ein bisschen ein Dilemma, aber sehr wichtig für uns. Vielleicht im VBS noch etwas spezifischer oder spezieller. Wir haben natürlich, wenn es um Sicherheit geht, ein bisschen ein Problem mit Abhängigkeiten. Wir müssen uns überlegen, was passiert eigentlich mit unserem Land in einem Krisenfall. Welche Systeme funktionieren denn noch? Heute ist es leider so, dass die großen Tech-Firmen weltweit agieren und Dinge zur Verfügung stellen. Wir können uns diesem Prozess gar nicht verschließen. Auch wir in der Schweiz müssen oder wollen diese neuesten Technologien nutzen, auch wenn wir dort Abhängigkeiten eingehen. Aber für uns ist es eben dann trotzdem wichtig, uns bewusst zu werden, welche Systeme sind für uns Schlüsselsysteme, was sind Schlüsselkompetenzen, die wir versuchen eben auch in der Schweiz zu behalten, damit wir im Krisenfall das Land auch weiter schützen können oder dass wir überhaupt funktionieren können. Das mag jetzt vielleicht etwas weit weg klingen und so ein bisschen nach Krieg und so. Wir haben es in der Pandemie gesehen, also wenn sogar unsere freundschaftlichen Nachbarn unsere Lastwagen mit den Masken anhalten und nicht mehr über die Grenze lassen, weil sie eigene Interessen schützen, dann sieht man, wie wichtig das eben ist und wie schnell es passieren kann, dass man plötzlich von diesen Abhängigkeiten im Griff ist. Wir haben dazu den Cyber Defense Campus im VBS aufgebaut. Das ist eine sehr spannende Geschichte. Sie müssen hier nicht Ihr eigenes Logo suchen. Es ist auch egal, welche das da drauf sind. Wichtig ist nur zu sehen die Fülle. Für uns ist sehr wichtig, arbeiten im Verbund. Also wir versuchen diese Kompetenzen, die für uns zentral sind, Schlüsselkompetenz für uns in der Schweiz, versuchen wir natürlich zu fördern und auch in Zusammenarbeit mit Hochschulen, mit Fachhochschulen, aber eben auch mit Startups, mit KMUs und so weiter weiterzuentwickeln und so im Verbund zu arbeiten. Das Wort Verbund ist ein Schlüsselwort oder vielleicht besser in Kooperation. Wir können in diesem Bereich, im Cyberbereich, wo die Kompetenzen nicht massenhaft vorhanden ist, es uns nicht leisten, alles x-fach aufzubauen in der kleinen Schweiz. Wir müssen lernen, miteinander zu arbeiten und eben die Systeme und die Kompetenzen im Griff zu haben. Ein kleiner Blick in die Werkstatt. Wo sind wir gerade dabei? Auch hier werden wir wieder sehen. Auf der einen Seite sprechen wir über Digitalisierung, über den Nutzen, auf der anderen Seite aber über die Sicherheit, wie wir das vereinen. Digital Journey VBS, das ist, wie wir die Digitalisierung angehen. Auch hier sehen Sie schon etwas die Art und Weise, wie man arbeitet, vielleicht neu, eben nicht mehr mit dieser herkömmlichen Methode, Initialisierung, Grobkonzept, Detailkonzept, Umsetzung und dann sind wir dann in Jahr 3 bei größeren Projekten oder sogar 4, das funktioniert heute nicht mehr, sondern eben mit diesen Sprints, wo wir versuchen, MVPs oder was auch immer, schon Problemlösungen konkrete auf dem Tisch zu haben und dann eben neue Einflüsse, die sich ständig verändern, aufzunehmen und in dieses Produkt einzubauen und uns so weiterzuentwickeln. Also das ist für uns wichtig, das ist wie eine Reise. Stellen Sie sich vor, Sie gehen auf eine Weltreise, Sie treffen immer wieder neue Leute, Sie bereisen neue Länder, haben neue Eindrücke und Sie nehmen das alles irgendwie mit. Sie treffen auch Leute, die Sie nie wieder sehen wollen. Sie treffen Leute, die werden zu Freunden und so. So stellen wir uns diese Digital Journey vor beim VBS, wo es eben darum geht, diese Digitalisierung voranzutreiben. Ein weiteres Thema, das für uns sehr wichtig ist, eben im Bereich Sicherheit, ist Cyber Defense. Das ist sicher eine Eigenheit im VBS, dass wir eben zuständig sind, zum Schutz des Landes beizutragen und im Cyberraum zu verteidigen. Also wir sind die Einzigen, die eigentlich auch verteidigen können im Cyberraum, im Konfliktfall. Und für uns ist es sehr wichtig, dass wir die Cyber-Herausforderungen, die Bedrohungen jederzeit erkennen können und darauf reagieren können. Das ist für uns sehr wichtig. Wir haben uns dazu klare Ziele gesetzt. Wir müssen, und das ist die Grundvoraussetzung, die Herausforderungen und die Entwicklungen im Cyberraum kennen. Also wir können ja nicht reagieren, wenn wir die Entwicklungen nicht kennen. Das ist sehr wichtig. Da kommen wir dann wieder eben auch zum Cyber Defense Campus, der uns hilft, die neuesten Trends in diesem Bereich zu kennen und eben auch Forschung und Entwicklung in diesem Bereich zu tätigen. Wir sind dann fähig, wenn wir Dinge erkennen, wenn wir Bedrohungen und Angriffe sehen, diesen vorzubeugen. Da ist die internationale Zusammenarbeit sehr wichtig, mit anderen Geheimdiensten beispielsweise, die gewisse Dinge sehen auf der Welt, wo wir uns dann darauf vorbereiten können, dass wir davon keinen Schaden nehmen. Ganz wichtig auch Aus- und Weiterbildungen. Wir versuchen unser Know-how eben an den Kooperationspartner mit denen zu teilen, damit wir uns als Gesamtsystem im Verbund weiterentwickeln können und so eigentlich bestmöglichst vorbereitet sind. Wir versuchen die Anfälligkeit für Cyberrisiken zu minimieren und resistent zu sein. Und eben was auch wichtig ist, das habe ich schon angedeutet mit der Abhängigkeit. Wir halten das Material, also Hardware, Software, Netzwerke auf dem aktuellen Stand. Das ist sehr schwierig. Häufig kennt man gar nicht den Inhalt der Hardware beispielsweise. Wir wissen nicht, was da drin abläuft. Wir kaufen irgendwelche Standardgeräte, wir haben die im Einsatz, aber wir wissen eigentlich gar nicht, was da im Hintergrund alles abläuft. Also ist es wichtig, dass wir unser Material bestmöglichst kennen, aber eben auch auf dem aktuellen Stand haben, damit Angriffe nicht zielführend sind. Und das Letzte, wir versuchen mit diesen Zielen uns dann auch als Vorbild zu positionieren und so ein attraktiver Arbeitgeber zu sein, damit wir eben auch diese Kompetenzen anziehen. Wir brauchen die besten Leute, um eben diese besten Produkte herstellen zu können, beziehungsweise den höchstmöglichen Schutz für unser Land sicherzustellen. Wir haben 4 Hauptbereiche definiert in dieser Cyber-Defense-Strategie. Wir haben oben der grüne Bereich, wo die eigentliche Cybersicherheit eben drin ist, wo es darum geht, unsere eigenen Systeme zu schützen. Das ist das, was Sie in Ihrer Unternehmung auch kennen, wo man eben versucht, sich so weit abzusichern, dass kein Schaden, dass keine Eindringlinge reinkommen und so weiter. Das ist eigentlich das, was wir im Bereich der Sicherheit machen. Dann links unten, das ist der Spannende, das Gelbe, Lage und Aktion. Dort finden tatsächlich eben Aktionen statt in diesem Cyberraum, wenn man etwas erkennt, wo man darauf reagiert, aber auch Lage, also ganz wichtig ist eben auch ein ständiges Lagebild zu entwickeln. Das machen wir mit dem Nachrichtendienst bei uns im VBS, die eigentlich die Lage weltweit darstellen und so die Risiken auch sichtbar machen. Im violetten Bereich Trendmonitoring und Unterstützung habe ich vorhin schon angedeutet mit dem Cyber Defense Campus. Dort machen wir Forschung und Entwicklung. Cyber Defense Campus ist beispielsweise stark in der Robotik, wo eigentlich auch dann die Robotik für die Armee zur Verfügung gestellt wird, oder auch im Bereich der künstlichen Intelligenz oder Data Science sind alles Zukunftsthemen, die dort abgearbeitet werden, in Zusammenarbeit eben im Verbund mit verschiedenen Partnern, insbesondere mit der ETH in Zürich und in Lausanne. Und wenn man so viele Player hat innerhalb des VBS, also das ist eine große Cybergemeinschaft im VBS, dann braucht es natürlich auch eine gewisse Koordination und auch da wieder eine Governance. Das ist der Bereich in der Mitte, der blaue Bereich, der das illustriert, wo man eigentlich diese Zusammenarbeit steuert und wir auch versuchen, gegenseitig uns zu unterstützen in diesen Themen, um unsere Aufgaben bestmöglichst zu erfüllen. Das ist ein kurzer Einblick in den Bereich Digitalisierung und Cybersicherheit im VBS. Unser Motto: digital, aber sicher. Ich hoffe, ich konnte Ihnen einen kleinen Einblick geben in unsere Welt, in unsere Arbeitswelt. Ich stehe unter der E-Mail-Adresse gerne für Fragen zur Verfügung. Danke herzlich für die Einladung und wünsche weiterhin einen spannenden Vormittag.
Thank you, Roger, for this interesting contribution. I hope you're ready for the next speakers up on stage. The state of the Swiss cyberspace, the attack surface and adversary tactics against Switzerland's online infrastructure. DreamLab has been developing and implementing security solutions for vulnerable IT infrastructures for 20 years. My next guests are the 2 managing directors of DreamLab.
A very warm welcome, ladies and gentlemen, from my side. I'm actually extremely excited and thrilled to be delivering this keynote about the state of the Swiss cyberspace, its attack surface and adversary tactics against its online infrastructure. My name is Nick Meincourt. I'm the founder and global CEO of DreamLab Technologies.
And I am Mark Peter, professor at the FHNW School of Business and a member of DreamLab's management team. DreamLab Technologies is a Bern-based IT security company. We are 20 years old, are active on 4 continents and provide Swiss-made cyber security. Today we will introduce you to key events over the past 12 to 18 months. We will introduce you to the state of the Swiss cyberspace and provide a special snapshot on the importance of home office in the times of the pandemic and Corona. We then move to a honeypot, a Swiss honeypot, to provide you with an idea of to which degree Swiss infrastructure is being attacked just in a 24-hour snapshot. We then widen the horizon and provide a view of command and control systems and infrastructure and close off with some recommendations how we should protect our cyberspace.
And now let's look at some key events in review in 2020-2021. We have seen something remarkable, which are cyber attacks targeting ICS, industrial control systems, and SCADA infrastructures. In essence and practice, this means that it can lead to the need of halting whole production systems, as in this example, Honda needed to do that. A second very remarkable event has been a criminal activity leading to leakage of millions of biometric data of Brazilian citizens. Their biometric data has been robbed and is now at disposal for criminal activities. Another rather new and young phenomenon that we have seen in the year 2020 was an attack on a software supply chain. It was an attack geared towards open source software that is at heart of commercial systems, commercial products, and this open source software has been infiltrated by attackers where they have put their malicious code, and this malicious code has ended up in many, many, many commercially available products that we are using every day. Another very remarkable event has been the Blue Leaks, the dubbed Blue Leaks. Blue Leaks is referring to an event where those institutions and government agencies that are tasked to protect us citizens, that are tasked to protect our sensitive, most intimate data, have been hacked themselves. And so internal police files and other aspects have been leaked to the public internet. Another devastating cyber attack was geared towards the healthcare system. In this particular example, it was a ransomware attack geared towards a medical institution that has led its systems to a full stop and halt. In consequence of this, unfortunately, people died as a direct consequence of this cyber attack. Now we're going to some remarkable examples for Switzerland. We have seen, which is called the Infinity Black moment, hacker groups selling database with millions of user credentials from Swiss citizens and people. Direct ransomware attacks have been targeting Swiss companies, reputable Swiss companies, like in this example, Stadler Rail. It has also attacked Swiss universities. In this particular example, the attackers, the adversaries, were so smart to be changing the account numbers in the payrolling and therefore extracting money directly to their accounts, which was intended to be a payment slip for their employees. In the end of 2020, there was another remarkable attack on a Swiss company called Huber & Suhner, which in consequence as well, needed to halt their production facilities, interrupt their businesses for many days and weeks before being able to recover. Not exactly in 2020, early this year in 2021, there is also good news to be shared. Europol, in a concerted international effort, has successfully taken down the Emotet botnet, which accounts for lots of those criminal behaviors, and this is one point in case that we can actually take action and fight against modern cybercrime. So the 2020 in review, I would like to share some key observations. Basically, it is more of the same. It has become more and more intense.
Every year at the Swiss Cybersecurity Days, we are very proud to present the state of the Swiss cyberspace to you. Cyberspace, that is the new dimension. We all know how to conduct ourselves and protect ourselves from the physical dimensions, which we have known for thousands of years. But the cyberspace is new to us, and many governments and businesses, but also we as citizens, still have to learn to navigate the cyberspace. We conducted a so-called external scan of the Swiss cyberspace. We scanned and analyzed everything which is connected to what we call the Swiss cyberspace. This is now our third study. It is the third year, and only a couple of months ago, Switch provided access to the full database of .ch domains, which has widened our scan across all IP addresses as well as .ch domains, and we can basically see that we haven't improved. So over the past 3 years, our risk exposure has remained the same. We scanned over 20 million IP4 addresses allocated to Switzerland, 2.3 million .ch domain names, and you can see the result are over 100,000 known and documented vulnerabilities. We wanted to know who are the owners of the .ch domain names, and yes, the majority is registered in Switzerland and hosted in Switzerland, and we can see where the DNS server infrastructure is located. But it is all over. It is across Europe as well, and it is across the globe. My question to you is, what would you say is now the Swiss cyberspace? Is it only assets located in Switzerland, or are .ch domains located across the world part of the Swiss cyberspace as well? We say yes, and therefore as a nation we need to have a view of that infrastructure globally, which belongs to the Swiss cyberspace. When we looked at the .ch domain names, we found some funny things. Look at all these long domain names, they're very easy to remember. But we also found some domain names which indicate that things might be wrong with these and they might be used for some illegal activity.
In the context of our scanning of the Swiss attack surface on its public internet and cyberspace, we also confirmed extremely relevant vulnerabilities. You see the statistics here. They range from open databases across VPN systems, across mail systems, and they have been verified, and they're literally in the thousands of exposed vulnerable devices in the Swiss cyberspace. On the aspect of operating systems, we see over 3,000 Windows systems unprotected and reachable directly naked on the internet. Of these over 3,000 systems, a whopping 73% are running end-of-life OS versions. This means they cannot be serviced anymore, there will be no security updates, and they are most probably very prone to security breaches and issues. We have seen more of those exposed administrative interfaces, and we have seen more of very old vulnerabilities. Bluekeep, a vulnerability, a highly relevant vulnerability that has been published in the year 2019. As of today, in the Swiss cyberspace, still 322 hosts are vulnerable. Amongst these vulnerable organizations, we see universities, production facilities, and even internet providers. We have also scanned for a system called the Integrated Lights Out Management System. This is a system that is used to remotely manage your hardware. And we have found more than 400 IPs, 400 devices and servers being vulnerable to a known vulnerability dating back to the year of 2017. Amongst the affected organizations, we see physical security providers, alarming business, e-commerce providers, and even cloud providers. We have as well seen that some organizations are exposing their LAN resources on the internet. So what is supposed to be in a private LAN has been directly exposed to the internet, to the World Wide Web. And we see that in those exposed LAN resources, over 118 IPs are vulnerable to Eternal Blue and SMBv3 attacks. We have also seen exposed data sources. We have seen Mongo and Elasticsearch databases and servers being directly accessible without even an authentication. So 197 databases are directly accessible without any authentication in the Swiss cyberspace. Another over 800 FTP servers are providing open access to download and upload files at your own discretion. We scanned also for key technologies in today's digitized digital world, key technologies that we use on a daily basis to make work from home happening and a reality. We are talking about VPN appliances, and there are also known vulnerabilities. In this particular example, a known vulnerability dating back to 2018, where in the Swiss cyberspace still, as we talk today, 837 hosts are vulnerable, which means that the VPN that should provide security cannot provide security, as everybody using this vulnerability can actually access your VPN directly. We also see new technologies emerging and new areas that require our urgent attention. We have all learned about cloud technologies gaining traction, picking up. Everybody's going to the cloud for good reasons, and there are new technologies that are being used to make the cloud happen. Two of them are called Docker and Kubelet, and we have found unprotected and exposed management views and interfaces to these modern and new cloud technologies that deserve better securing. So if we would look like back in 2019 and 2020 in a review, and we did say this in the last two events, let us stop being naive about cyberspace and our use of modern technology. Let's live up our responsibilities and let's take action. We've seen over the last 2 years that complexity is ever increasing. We are seeing in our global interdependent world that dependencies are ever increasing. We see more and more cyber attacks happening. We also see that the intensity is growing rapidly. I ask myself sometimes, are we hitting a cyber fatigue? Don't we hear the alarms? Is this the tipping point? Is this the tipping point to the good or to the bad? I believe, and this is an urgent call for action, to bring up a digital rights framework and to start a conversation about responsibilities in a modern digitized society and democracy.
Now, of course, the home office and the pandemic deserve a very brief snapshot. We have seen in the first couple of weeks of the pandemic starting that over 200,000 domains were registered across the globe with a reference to Corona. We could see that millions of emails had to be blocked because of spam or phishing attempts using COVID-19 as a reason for employees and consumers to open emails. And we have seen that malware reports have increased massively. And you can see here how malware reports have come through the globe in the first 3 months of the pandemic. And also in Switzerland, we could see misuse of government logos in order to send phishing emails, and we can see that with that Tesla agent we could capture keystrokes and also passwords and then retrieve data from victims' computers. And globally, the pandemic was used to attack pharmaceuticals across the world, so of course businesses were targeted as well.
With what we have learned just now, we could have another review of 2020 and share some key observations. Better late than too late. It is time to start living up our responsibilities and taking action. Now to something completely different. We have set up a technology, it's called a honeypot and honeynet technology based on Kubernetes, that's why we call it Honeycube. And we have set this honeypot up in Swiss cyberspace for 1 single day. So what is a honeypot? It mirrors and exposes legitimate infrastructure to guide and attract attackers to engage and interact with the honeypot. It helps you to identify your cyber enemies. It gives you the basis and foundation to be learning from real-world attacker interaction and to be training your defenders and your teams. It also helps you to investigate global attack methods, provides evidence to investigators, and is the tool to monitor, measure, analyze, and extract relevant business insights. We have set up a Swiss honeypot and we have just let it run for 24 hours, 1 single day, and I am very happy to be sharing the insights and results that we have gained from this 1 single day. We have seen over 10,000 attacks from 28 countries. Within these attacks, we see remarkable elements that actually follow the general global theme of what we are reading in the press. The first thing that happened to our honeypot was an attack on our database, Elasticsearch honeypot, and the classical ransomware happened. So the attackers, the threat agents, did attack our Elasticsearch honeypot, and they did encrypt it, and they asked for a ransom with a ransomware in Bitcoins. On our FTP-based Honeycube, we have also seen that criminals have been putting crypto miners, malware that is supposed to mine for new Bitcoins. They have just placed the files in the hope that they are being downloaded and in the hope that somebody would actually execute them and start the mining facility for them. We have also seen over 10,000 brute force-based login attempts to our remote administrative interfaces, the SSH service honeypot. You can see some of the passwords being used here, and I'm also sharing some funny passwords that have been used as a login attempt on our Swiss honeypot. We have also seen several web-based attacks that attempt to do remote code execution. We have seen remote code execution attacks targeted on very popular ticketing and wiki systems, Jira and Confluence. We have seen attacks on IPTV systems, on modems and DSL modems, and we have seen router attacks and password dictionary attacks being conducted in the web sphere. Our Swiss honeypot allows also to profile attackers, and by profiling we start with looking where do those threat agents launch their attacks from. And it comes with no surprise that modern criminals are also using most modern and successful cloud providers as a launchpad to be launching their campaigns and to be conducting their criminal work and behaviors. On top of that, we do more sophisticated attacker profiling to understand and discern what we call the internet noise. So is it just a accidental attack, you could say, or is it a targeted attack? And in the latter case, we deep dive in the attacker profiling to be learning about their techniques, to be learning about their preferred types of attacks, to be learning about their tools, tips, and practices. So this is the technology that shows us directly what the aggressors and threat agents are using, how they are using it, and it allows us to learn from our enemy to actually defeat this very enemy and to improve and strengthen our defense. And now that we have seen a day in a Swiss honeypot, we switch the topic to command and control C2 systems identification and verification. We have done a unique research called rat spotting to identify command and control systems earlier than others do. So what is a rat? A rat is a remote access tool or a Trojan. In case of tool, it means it is a remote access tool for administrative purposes. We are not focusing on legitimate use cases. We are focusing in our research on remote access Trojans, better known as malware, ransomware, cryptoware, Trojans in any form. These Trojans are being implanted by threat agents and criminals on your devices. Once they have been successfully installed and implanted in your operating systems, the next thing they do is they contact home. They contact what we call the command and control system or the C2 server. With our unique research, we focus on the C2 servers, and by conducting massive internet scanning, we are able to measure and identify C2 servers while they are being built up, even prior to be launching any campaign or illegal activities, criminal activities. It's with great pleasure that I am sharing a statistic, a timeline where we measured new occurrences of C2 servers over time. I would like to have your attention on the July-August peak with this yellowish peak and graph. Those have been the months of the democratic protests happening in Hong Kong, and you see at the very same time as a digital twin that in cyberspace lots of malicious activities, campaigns and attacks are being launched at the same time. So we see a correlation between real-world events and the cyberspace. Later, on the right side of the graph, we see a whopping growth of more and more command and control servers. Actually, the year 2020 has become the record year for cybercrime. And this is due to the pandemic leading us, making us switch over to work from home arrangements, using VPN, consuming more and more emails, and obviously the first to have jumped on the wagon have been the criminals. They have been using those technologies to attack each and everybody, to conduct their attacks, to collect ransom, to get insights, and even to launch espionage targeted on vaccine research. Here we can also graph the different malware types used by criminal organizations or APT organizations over time. And this graph shows us, or this table shows us, the growth, the year-on-year growth rate of 2019 and 2020. And we see a remarkable growth. It almost next to doubled the amount of command and control servers. As well, we benchmark with the industry leaders, and we see that with our unique detection methodology, we are seeing substantially more of command and control servers than traditional market leaders. As an example, and this does not make me happy as a Swiss citizen, we do also see command and control servers being launched in Switzerland and used and operated in Switzerland, out of Switzerland. Most probably they are not used to spy or rob Swiss institutions or citizens. Most probably they are being used internationally. And the only question I would ask to Switzerland is that this could maybe become also reputational damage for Switzerland when Switzerland's infrastructure is being used to launch international attacks.
Rat spotting is important. It is important and crucial for nations and large organizations to identify command and control infrastructure before they are being used to attack a nation or a large organization. And with rat spotting, we have the ability to identify this infrastructure 2 to 4 weeks before they actually become active. So a very important cornerstone of cyber security. Now we're coming to an end. Let me summarize what we have seen. Cyber threats are there. The cyber dimension is vulnerable, and in Switzerland we haven't yet managed to reduce the external public attack surface. So a lot of work still needs to be done, and we need to implement proactive security measures. As a first step, we need to understand our data and be able to control data by understanding where our data is and how we shall protect it. Secondly, we need to have an understanding of the infrastructure and the assets connected to the internet. We could see that PSYOPs identified too many vulnerabilities as part of the Swiss public attack surface. We then have to reduce that attack surface by taking measures, hiding important assets and building defense mechanisms. We need to train our employees and build the necessary skills and continue to monitor our infrastructure and reduce cyber threats, for instance, via red-blue teaming exercises.
Thank you, Mark. So, to the recommendations in the cyber dimension, this is an urgent call and need for a paradigm shift. What we have been doing the last decades simply is not good enough. And we see this on everyday's news. There has been a cyber attack there has been a ransomware attack there, people dying as a consequence of the cyber not being properly secured. We need a paradigm shift. We need to start a conversation about accountabilities of digital societies, including awareness and education. We need to talk about our rights, our digital rights and privacy in a digitized world, in a cyber-connected world. And last but not least, we need to talk about product safety and a global cyber peace. So if we look at 2021 and beyond, our recommendations very clearly, we shall or must improve dramatically, and we must do it now before it is too late. It's with that I want to thank you for your time, and I am very much looking forward for the question and answer session, to be hearing your questions and providing answers. Thank you.
Within 1 year, we have twice as much as attacks as we had before. So that scares me. What about you, Mark?
Well, it is what we measured is the public attack surfaces vulnerabilities. And to be fair, yes, the number looks as we doubled. However, we also extended the scanning range because Switch made the full database of .ch domain names available. We now have a complete picture of all .ch domain names as well as the allocated IPv4 addresses. And so if we look at the vulnerabilities in relation to the total volume of assets connected to the internet which we scanned, then we remain in that region of 5% of the public attack surface being vulnerable. And these are vulnerabilities which are documented and known. So it doesn't mean that it makes it less concerning. The stats just show that we haven't improved over a 3-year period, and that is concerning given all the efforts we have implemented as a nation in education, in government's activities to educate citizens, and yet we still have the same percentage of known vulnerabilities in Switzerland, and that is the concerning point.
Does that keeps you awake at night, Nick?
Yes, even in Australia.
Well, for me, certainly, this keeps me awake at night. And certainly, I am asking myself, why do we fail to take action? Why do we keep seeing this? And what needs to be done that we actually ultimately start taking actions? The risks are pretty high and elevated, as we have seen. And in last year, we have seen an impressive amount of criminal activity happening due to Corona, due to pandemic. We are more and more depending on technology. We are working from home. We are conducting this event remotely. So we rely 100% on functionality of technology. And at the same time, we know that it's not secure. So this keeps me up at night, and it keeps me up at night. How can we make this call for action finally get through to the board, C-levels, politicians, and regulatory affairs?
So what needs to change as soon as possible? Maybe Mark can answer that.
Yeah, it's quite interesting for me to see how we on this planet have built and defined regulations and policies to protect citizens. We have regulations and certifications for fire extinguishers and smoke alarms and planes which need to have emergency exits, and we conduct thorough tests before a plane is allowed to leave Earth and go into sky. And we don't have any of that in the cyber dimension. We don't ask that critical infrastructures and large retailers and critical infrastructure providers receive certification. We don't have that topic in public schools, and we don't assess students, young people, teenagers, whether they understood the core concepts. And so what we have done in all other dimensions, the physical dimensions, we should now implement in the cyber dimension as well.
What can we do that people are more aware of this problem? Nick, maybe?
Well, I believe what we are doing right now is a good thing, but we need more of everything. I mean, it is true that there is actually education material out there, but as well, it is true it is not taught at kindergarten, at primary and secondary elementary schools. It simply is missing, and it should be an integral part of all our societies, as Mark rightly outlined, as it has become omnipresent, our dependence on technology. I see today parents that just give an iPad, a tablet at disposal to their families, to their children, without any education. And I believe that's where we need to start. And I believe that the very same education that we owe to our young people, we as decision makers, board levels, C-levels, politicians should maybe run through the very same curriculum right now in order to be better informed and to know and appreciate the risks and chances that we have in cyber.
Mm-hmm. Does it make sense to have insurance against cybercrime? Mark?
Well, yes, yes and no. Yes, it does in order to protect for the unforeseen, which is out of control. No, because many SMEs first need to do their homework. What I'm very thankful for is that insurance companies run a small audit. So if someone asks for insurance, then the business owner needs to run through a questionnaire. And in many cases, that is a wake-up call for the business owner where he or she realizes how little that has been done. So I think the first call is that as a business owner, I need to really understand what threats there are and what measures I can take, but then insurance makes sense as that extra layer.
Uh-huh. So what is your guess, Nick, how many companies still use outdated software on their computers?
Well, we did actually just present a measurement about it on the public attack surface, and I guess that in the non-public attack surfaces, the image is worse. And so I believe that it's a very high percentage that is actually running outdated software. And I would like to expand on what we just had before, the regulated industries of the physical world. Those physical regulations, as they stand today, they are also part of the problem of cyberspace. If you take the example of healthcare or planes, any regulated industry, those regulations lead to organizations not being able to update their software. Why is that? Because those devices, pacemakers, planes, you name it, they need to be safety and security checked before they can enter a market. When they enter the market, part of the certification is that you are not allowed to update that software, which then leads to your plane and your operational robot and your pacemaker running on outdated software. This cannot be our goal. So we need to rethink how we regulate physical assets in a digitized, hyper-connected world. So this initial idea, that's a good idea, just needs to evolve and be transported to our today's realities. Regarding the insurance and assurance part, I would like to double down on this, and it's all about aligning of interests. If that questionnaire that insurers actually do run their customers through in the onboarding leads just to paperwork, I would say it would be part of a problem. But if that really is a call for action that then actually provokes an improvement of the situation, then I believe insurance work is a very good work. And so it's about aligning the interests to actually achieve our target, our ultimate target of making this world a more secure place.
Yeah, I see that point. I see we have 2 minutes left. So what are your final thoughts and call to action to the audience? We start with Mark.
Yes, I thought about what steps we could take. And I'm thinking about the business world, of course, with all the companies in Switzerland. And about 20 years ago, we started to move away from a shareholder view to a stakeholder view. So many participants connected to the interests of an organization. We then moved into sustainability conversations where many companies still have to do a lot of work to provide sustainable production, products and services. And I think now is time to shift the conversation to that cybersecurity dimension. And I would hope that in the future, shareholders or stakeholders to a business also ask the management team the question, well, how much have you done as an organization before I invest money or before I become a customer to protect my data and protect my interests?
I agree. Nick, what are your final thoughts?
That's a tough one. Thank you very much, Mark. I can just actually double down. That's exactly and precisely what it is. And I would just like to expand a little bit. The World Economic Forum sees the climate shift, environmental issues and cybersecurity issues as risk number 1 and 2 on global stability. And we should stop being naive in the cyberspace, and we should start taking action as you just outlined, Mark. Thank you very much.
All right. So thank you guys for being with me for this interesting conversation. And I have seen on the program, it's not the last time you're here up on stage. We've seen you again up on stage.
Hi. My name is Nick Dawson. I'm the Global Director of B2B Solutions for Samsung Electronics. Listen, it's very disappointing that we can't all get together in Fribourg like we normally do. I'm missing my time in Switzerland this year, but at least we get to come to you this way, and it's a pleasure to have the opportunity to speak to you again. So listen, I only have a few minutes here, so why don't we get started if we can? I want to talk to you today a little bit about privacy and trust, and the exposure that we have in this fourth industrial revolution that we're at the early stages of as technology evolves. And to do that, I really want to start off by talking a little bit, just a recap of some of the themes I touched on last year during the conference, where I talked a lot about how 5G technology and the speeds and the near zero latency, as in no delays on the network, is really giving rise finally to this, massive adoption of new types of devices, IoT, the Internet of Things, different devices that serve different purposes, and that are really going to fundamentally change the way we live our lives, both personally and in business. And how that in turn leads to the necessity for artificial intelligence systems as either decision support tools or even automated decision tools, because more and more data is coming at us, and our systems of today, or certainly of the past, are not necessarily equipped to deal with the type or the amount of data that we're facing today as we go forward. That was really what I touched on last year, talking a little bit about this nascent future. We're at the early stages of it, and it's already happening in many parts of the world. And if you don't really see it happening around you, trust me, this wave is coming to you very, very, very soon. But all of this is really fundamentally about data. Right? And the biggest theme that I am seeing out there in the world, whether it's in the corporate space where I work, in the government space, or in the personal space, it's all around privacy and trust. Now, privacy and trust are rooted and anchored in security. We absolutely need to operate in a secure world. We need secure devices, secure systems. But fundamentally, it's about privacy and trust, and how do we secure our data? So if we look at the different types of risks out there, and this is very, very broad overview, of course, from the consumer side, and we are all consumers, we are giving up, and I think everybody knows this now. This has come to the forefront in the past few years, that we are giving up an awful lot of our own personal data. All of these serve self, your partners, and other people within your value chain to any of these risks that are out there. So we have the same problem across the board, whether we're consumers, whether we're in business or government. The control of the data, how do we treat it? And again, if we go back to my themes from last year at the Swiss Cybersecurity Days conference, where I talked about 5G bringing out more and more different types of devices that are chunking up more and more data, distributing it into more computing systems and more connections happening. We have more transfer of data happening all of the time, and it's growing exponentially out there. And we are at risk of losing control over what happens to all of this data. It is expanding at a massive scale. So let's talk about a few of those things here today, and just address at a fairly high level, of course, in the amount of time that we have, what it is that we should be thinking about, and perhaps some of the things that we can do. Now, first of all, I want to come back to data itself. Data exists in different forms out there, and it doesn't matter if it's your banking application information, your passwords, or corporate intellectual property. You have data is transacted in many different ways. There's data in transit. For example, I work at Samsung. We're very well known for mobile computing, whether it be smartphones, tablets, Chromebooks, laptops. We build them all. There's obviously, in our mobile world, there's an awful lot of data in transit out there over the networks. Now, the old way, and the current way for most of us still, is to use VPNs to try to secure this data while it's in transit from its source to its destination and then back again. There's a new model out there that's been coming to the fore over the past few years. It's called Zero Trust. And for those of you who aren't familiar with it, I do urge you to do a little bit of reading on Zero Trust. The concept behind Zero Trust is really about continuously authenticating who you are, who the person accessing data or a system or a service or an application is, as opposed to making one big chunk tunnel to send all of the data through. Perhaps we are pinpointing specific services that you have access to under certain conditions, but not under other conditions. But one of the concepts is continuous authentication. Are you typing the same way? Is your password valid? Have you done something to change the context in which you're using your data? Anyways, I would urge you to take a look at this, all of you. Again, enterprise, large or small, or government. Zero Trust is a new way of thinking about how to manage data that's in transit. Oh, I'm sorry, I went a little fast there. We also have data at rest. Now, data at rest is actually one of these very, very strange things. I've mentioned this before, but I'd like to repeat it. When we talk about data at rest and encrypting data on our computing devices, again, be it a smartphone, a tablet, a laptop, it doesn't matter. We're actually talking about encrypting data when the power is turned off. When you're not using the device, I have my phone here right next to me. It is powered on. I'm not using it. It's not at rest. The data on this device, in most cases, is actually in an unencrypted state. You need to consider that. You need to be aware that as soon as a computing appliance is turned on, and if we think about an IoT-driven world where we have data sitting in sensors on the tops of light poles or in nuclear power stations or in hospital basements or wherever it may be. All of that data, while those appliances and those devices are turned on, is actually in an unencrypted state. How do we protect that? How do we guard against that? And then, of course, there's data in use as well. Data in use is a little bit different. Data in use is when I have it in front of me, I'm doing something. It could be with, a Word document. It could be an application where I'm entering things. How do I treat this data and how do I segregate it from other things? And data cannot be encrypted while it's in use. It can be encrypted while it's at rest if people know what they're doing, but it cannot be encrypted while it's in use. And you need to be aware of that as you're building out services and applications in this modern world. So I just wanted to touch on that because there's different ways of thinking about how data is, where it is in its life cycle chain as you're using it. So how do we protect ourselves as consumers? How do businesses keep up with privacy legislation and ensure that their own data isn't exposed to people? Well, the strange thing is we actually already know all of the answers to this, but we don't always collectively, follow the advice that we give ourselves. And the reality is it's fairly simple if we think about it, if we take a very high level view. First of all, you need to isolate the data itself. If you have work data and personal data, if you have customer data and your own work data, you must isolate these things. And it's very easy to do that these days. The tools are there. You simply have to take advantage of them. Always encrypt data wherever possible. And I put this out there, especially for those of you who are with smaller companies or in the startup ecosystem, building exciting new services and applications. You must pay attention to this. Take advantage of the encryption technologies that are available. Take advantage of them at the platform level. And one of the things about data encryption is it should always be hardware backed. There's a box on the screen here that says devices, and then right next to it is secure. And in that it says have a full stack embedded security model. And I'm going to give you an example of what Samsung's is, obviously, in just a moment here. But it's very important that your security model for whatever device or appliance it is that you are using for your services and your applications, it's very important that the security model be embedded within the device. It is almost impossible to add security to something after the fact. Because that security solution that you might be installing or trying to take advantage of, if it's not part of the device, if it's not part of the appliance itself, it's just a layer on top. And that means there's a break point between the two. It means that somebody who's very, very clever and really wants to will be able to find a way in between those layers. It is incredibly important to deal with people and organizations and equipment vendors who have a full stack embedded security model. One thing that's incredibly important out there, and we're seeing it more and more, specifically in the government space, but a lot of sensitive industries and large enterprise and sensitive industries as well, is the security of the supply chain as well. Samsung is the world's largest electronics manufacturer. We build about roughly 1 million devices a day. Every single day of the year, and ship them all around the world. We are actually the only company, and for all of our protection. And to be honest with you, it's not just about you, it's about all of us, because you might be dealing with somebody else's data. One of the things that I remind people of fairly frequently when they're on social media, and I'm not going to name any particular sites, but they might click a little game, or they might take a little survey. They click a link. And it's free and it's fun, right, for a moment for them. The reality is what you're doing when you click that link is you're giving up data. You're giving up access to everything on that computing device, within your account on that device. That's not just your name and your phone number and your address and your buying patterns and your browser history that you're giving up, but you're also giving access to all of your friends, say, all of your contacts, and all of their information as well. It is absolutely paramount that all of us think about these things in our daily consumer lives, and certainly from a business context. In the world that I live in, working with enterprise, large and small, and government around the world, this is something that we take very seriously, and we work on it on a constant basis to ensure that we are treating our customers and our partners' data, not just Samsung, but their customers and their partners' data as well, in the best way that we possibly can. And I just wanted to touch on some of these themes here with you today. Where we're going with all of this as an industry is we're actually, and this is actually a little bit of a recap again from some of the things I spoke about last year, when we were able to congregate in Fribourg, and I think it was probably the last time some of us were able to get together, is we're actually going beyond the devices themselves as well. We at Samsung, of course, most of our devices are in the mobile space. We work with network operators and carriers around the world, so we work with them on security models as well. But we are embedding our security platform into every device that we build, as any other vendor in this space that is doing these types of things would do as well. But we're moving beyond that. We're moving into analytics. We're moving into situational and contextual awareness, be able to feed some of the important data points from the device about how it's being used, who is using it, into these AI engines and mobile threat defense systems in order to better protect you. What we're trying to do essentially, and we're partway there already, we're a good part of the way there, is we're trying to extend the threat protection envelope beyond just the device itself. So it doesn't matter whether you're on your phone, your laptop, you're moving between the two, it doesn't matter what network you're on, where you are always going to be protected. And again, for those of you on the industry side of things, who are participating today, as you're building out your systems and services, you need to think along these lines as well. And we're more than happy at Samsung to have a conversation with you about how we do this with our software and our services and our tens of thousands of solution vendor partners around the world. So those are just some of the things that I wanted to touch on today. We don't have tons of time. I do hope that you enjoy this conference as best we can, given the situation. And I certainly look forward to seeing all of you next year, hopefully, in Fribourg. Thank you for your time. I hope that was helpful. Enjoy all the rest of the speakers. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Nick Dawson. Je vous invite à aller regarder en détail le programme du jour parce que vous allez voir à chaque fois.
So let me summarize the situation. The digital age, digital transformation provides many opportunities to Swiss businesses, but they also increase the attack surface, and therefore we all can see higher risks in the cyber dimension. Now, it is important that we actively discuss that with our employees, because the home office and blended working only increases that attack surface. It is important that we train our employees and build awareness, that we take organizational measures as well as technical measures. Now, all the studies presented today are available on these websites for a free download. I also would like to highlight an important book which we just published a couple of weeks ago. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for your attention. Please contact me for any further information you would like about our studies and the work we do at the university. Thank you.
What is the name of the downloadable book again for the people in the audience? Because I think this is just for
it's called,
just for orientation, because it's so interesting.
So what we have up there is called the OSTMM, the OSSTMM. It stands for the Open Source Security Testing Methodology Manual, and you're looking for Chapter 5.
Chapter 5.
Talks about trust.
Shameless plug, we had the honor and pleasure to be talking to the founder and president of the institute editing the OSTMM. It's called the ISACOM Institute for Security and Open Methodologies, www.isacom.org, and all that research is free. It's open source. Go there, download it, study it, apply it, and help us making this world a better, more trustworthy and safer place.
Thank you very much, Pete. Thank you very much, Nick. This is great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
And she is talking about the Swiss cybersecurity startup map. And Sandra Tobler, the stage is yours.
Hi, my name is Sandra Tobler. I'm co-founder and CEO of the local cybersecurity startup FutureA. How many times did I hear, why don't we have a more successful cybersecurity startup ecosystem in Switzerland, and success stories that are known across the globe? We have so many ingredients for successes in that area. We have some of the world's best educational system, a dual education system with a lot of practical experience. We are not known for offensive operations on the globe compared to a lot of the product innovators that are leading in that space. And also, we actually do have quite some activity already if you look at the per capita data. We all agree we have a problem. We don't have enough IT security talent. And it's not good enough to just have multinationals. We need SMEs, we need the academia, and we specifically also need successful innovation transfer out of academia into startups that are working successfully. So what is still missing to build a strong cybersecurity startup ecosystem? These are some myths that a lot of early stage startups are confronted with based on my personal experience, but also the one from many others in that respect. Myth number one, a young company will not manage to deliver on time and in budget. If you look at data, 68% of all IT projects fail because of many different reasons. Because the founders in the early days have a lot higher stake in the ground. They are motivated to make sure this is a success since they have limited capacity to work on just an amount of leads, and they must be sure that those can be converted into the first customers. So the motivation is definitely higher. Another myth that a lot of companies are confronted with in the early days is if they're still around when they're engaging with them. So if you look at data, this is the data from ETH Transfer and from IT security, from IT specific companies. 93% of all IT companies are still around after 5 years. This is data from 2020. So what gives a company the chance, the security that a large vendor will not stop with a product line or is not affected by a data breach? I would claim that it's not a higher risk to engage with an early stage startup that has a product innovation. And the data shows they're still around and thriving successfully even after 5 years. Myth number 3, let's just build this in-house. A lot of products we know are commonly accepted that we trust them. If it's a firewall antivirus, our own interest to have an ecosystem in the area of IT security. Together with a group of entrepreneurs and also the Swiss Cybersecurity Days, we have launched the Swiss Cybersecurity Startup Map. Please have a look at talent in all types of different verticals. These are all product innovators you can reach out to, and this is the inventory you will find under the corresponding web page. It's my great pleasure to present this initiative. Please reach out. We have great entrepreneurs here. Myself, I have founded the last now almost 5 years Future A together with my co-founders, and I'm excited to see how the Swiss cybersecurity ecosystem is evolving and growing and thriving together with all of you, because you can make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. Very interesting.